And so what we are going to do is we're going to prepare ourselves to jump in. I'm going to kick it to Cody for some opening thoughts, and then we are going to hear from our authors and begin our discussion today. We have so much to talk about. I don't know if an hour is going to be sufficient, but we're going to do our best. So Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you that we can be here with you. Lord, bless this session. Lord, continue to use these authors, Lord God, who chronicle not only our story, but Lord, the story of our nation. And Father God, we ask that it would be required reading and desired reading, Lord, around not only this country, but around the world as well. We thank you for hearing this prayer and for blessing this session. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Cody.
Yes,
Cody.
yes. I have to thank you, Pastor, for this opportunity. I enjoy these Thursday mornings, and I get a chance to revisit some old friends that I hadn't seen in a while. And today is no exception. I haven't seen Fasaha Traylor in years. First met Fasaha through the William Penn Foundation years ago. Yeah, when I was struggling trying to get help, and Dr. Bernard Watson was a close friend. And I visited him at William Penn, and that's where I met Fasaha, who became very helpful to me with my business. And I was always grateful. And then I realized I knew her husband, through Dave Richardson. So I'm familiar with Fasaha, but other people may not be. So I guess, Pastor, when we turn it over to them, we'll get a chance to ask Fasaha Traylor and Dr. Baker Rogers a little bit about their background. Fasaha, are you doctor?
No, I am ABD.
Okay.
That is all but dissertation.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm feeling some kind of way about that.
Yeah.
Which one?
This woman is one of my mentors, so yeah.
I thought she may have had her doctorate. I knew that at
I
one time
should have, and don't say anything to Bernie Watson about it, because every time he talks, that's his first conversation.
I know. Well, Pastor, did you want to add something before we go to both of them? Because, like I said, I know Fasaha. I'm just meeting Ms. Baker Rogers. I've heard of her, but I'm just meeting her. So maybe both of them, once you turn it over to them, can give us a little bit about their background.
Yep, that's right. Dr. Rogers Baker.
So let's call me Sissy.
Okay.
I am a native West Philadelphian, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. And my work in the city wasn't necessarily all over the place, but it first started in housing. At Dignity Housing, I first worked for Alicia Christian as a social service coordinator and the head of her youth programs. But predominantly from there, I've spent my career in higher education as an academic department director and as a professor of educational research. I also have a very, very strong background and commitment to the work that I've done as a civic advocate in the city of Philadelphia. I am an honorary board member of Public Citizens for Children and Youth and former president of the organization. I am also a former chair of the Philadelphia County Assistance Office and have been involved with United Way in the city of Philadelphia and on a number of initiatives. So it's good to be here with you folks this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am what I call, in fact, I think I made up this category myself. I am what you call a naturalized Philadelphian. Okay. Which means that I have been here since, like the mid 60s or so. Okay. And so that means that I can't go to a neighborhood like Addison Street, like my colleague here, and say, these are our roots, et cetera, et cetera. But I love Philadelphia. I've made my family here. And I hope that I've contributed to Philadelphia. I started out, I was the founder of a Black independent school, Nithamu Sasa. And after doing that, and I also worked in the public school system as in the Germantown Area Schools Project. many of whose graduates are like doing really fantastic things today. I worked in local universities, LaSalle University, trying to connect community needs with academics. And then I went to work for the William Penn Foundation, where, first of all, I probably never would have done it were it not for Bernie Watson, who has really had a large influence on my life. And while there, I did all kinds of things: violence prevention, uh, a lot of stuff in early childhood, did a lot of stuff with Black schools, historically Black schools all around the country, Spelman, Morehouse, and some predominantly white institutions around, trying to increase the number of Black people who were entering into STEM fields. After that, I went to work in New York for what I thought was going to be like 2 years. And I looked up, and 12 years later, I was still working in New York at the Foundation for Child Development. So I said, okay, that's it. Came back home, and it wasn't like but a few months before I got this call from my colleague, Sissy. And I actually didn't say that how we met was, I was involved in the board of what was then Philadelphia Citizens for Children and Youth, and so was she. And so we collaborated a lot with that work. She was a board chair, then I was a board chair. So that was really the roots of our relationship.
I think that was in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, I did some work with Dignity Housing, so I'm
Okay.
familiar with that program. I may have seen you at one of their functions.
Probably, yeah. And you probably
So
also
let
know
us.
someone. You probably also know someone I grew up with, Denise King, jazz
I
artist.
do know Denise King.
She's
Very close with Beverly, though, that worked
okay.
there.
Okay.
Mhm. So, to the Canaan listeners, they have written a book called "They Carried Us," and it's a very appropriate book for this time because Black women have carried us over the years. They just were never given the recognition and credit for. And it's good to see a book now that recognizes the contributions, some of the contributions of some of the women who were instrumental in the development of our lives. So tell us how you came about this and how you chose the women to highlight.
Yeah, there were a lot of knockdown dragouts. Much more agreement.
I can imagine.
Well, we generally respond to that question by saying that I started this first as my foray into social media back in 2012. I had an associate who was working with me for my newly developed consulting company, Progressive Leadership, for progressive leaders. And we talked about how we could make a good foray into social media. I went kicking and screaming. And then finally I decided, okay, let's, it's almost Black History Month, almost Women's History Month. Let's focus on a project that targets local Black women. And the attention and response to the work that we did in profiling one Black woman in the city of Philadelphia every day was just staggering. I don't know why, but surprise was the word that the interest in knowing who those women were, was really large. And so from there, obviously I said that this is something that needs further attention. And that's when I approached Fasaha about working with me on a book. And that book became They Carried Us. In terms of, you want to speak to how we selected, I'm going to dive down.
Okay, all right. Well, first
We
I want to
take
give.
turns with that question.
Okay, well, first I want to warn everybody that if somebody calls you up and says, "Let's write a book," and then you say you think that that's like a harmless thing. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Then I want you to know that you are in for something. Okay. Now, as to the how we chose the women, we developed some criteria, many of which anybody would come up with. They were things like whether it's someone who founded something, who was the first to do something, that sort of thing. But the real discriminating criterion, the one that really sort of made the difference in who we thought we could fit into this book, was women who had a social impact. I mean, we were trying to really uncover what was the impact of this woman's life and career. So that that was what we were trying to do. And of course, we weren't a minute into it before we realized that there were many, 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 many more women who should be in this book that we just simply couldn't put in the book. I mean, the book is already 600 pages. Okay, so if we put any more women in the book, I mean, it would have been unwieldy, or maybe it would have been like an encyclopedia or something like that.
And we might very well still be working on it.
Yeah, so it's really, I think that, we did our best. We readily acknowledge that these are not, we don't want people to see this as some kind of, this, if you're not in this book, you're nobody, okay? Really, we really don't want people to see it like that. We really want people to see this book really as emblematic of all the women who are in all our communities, who are doing all kinds of work each and every day, who never get any credit, and who, do that work anyway.
Yeah.
And the one thing I just want to add is that they had, they were either like Fasaha and myself, either native Philadelphians or, what's your word? Naturalized Philadelphians. So.
Yeah, well, I want to tell you, I just want to commend both of you for it. I have only gotten through a portion of the book, to be frank with you, because there's a saying that we have in the Bible that a prophet has honor everywhere except their hometown. And I must admit, being a Philly born, raised, there were so many names that, quite honestly, I had never heard of before. And it is amazing how we have so much treasure right here in our city, and particularly right here in our own Black community, that we just simply are unaware of. And so I just want to, again, kudos to both of you for this. I will say to you, I think that it's the groundwork for a second volume. I just
Absolutely.
want to, Cody, I want to go on the record for that.
Absolutely.
To say, I think this thing screams for a second volume because, again, the names that the information and the backgrounds and their stories, it is so intriguing because one of the things that I thought was so applicable about it is that our people have always been in the struggle. Like they have always had obstacles to overcome. And so, again, looking at just Ona's story, as an enslaved woman in this country, and all of the ingenuity to not only to survive, but also to get her own liberation. And so I'm going to kick it back to Cody, but I just want to say, I think it should be required reading because so many of us, we think, oh God, 2020 is so hard. And you're like, look at history.
Yes.
History will tell you it's always been hard, but that we can make it. And not only can we make it, but we can also thrive as well. So again, second volume, as well as commendations for a job well done.
Well, Pastor and I, Fasaha and Sissy, believe strongly that it's a woman's time, specifically Black women. And Black women, rightfully so, are being pushed to the forefront, or are just nudging their way, or have nudged their way to the forefront. And I think it's long overdue. And if you ask activists, Black women, to name 15, and that's a stretch, Black women who have contributed to this society, to Philadelphia's growth in society, I don't know that they could do that. That's why I think your book is so valuable.
Yeah, you know, I agree. I really wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Fasaha and I are, you know, currently, to speak to the pastor's point about required reading, you know, there's required reading for us as adults in learning our history, our Black history, but there's also the required reading that we think is really important for our youth. And so we're trying to work now with the School District of Philadelphia and with the Teach for America organization, you know, to get this book into the hands of teachers and ultimately, obviously, into the hands of students. What so many Philadelphians don't know is that the women in this book, as you said, laid the groundwork, tackled some of the most important issues, social construct issues that the city of Philadelphia faced real early on, you know, in its development. You know, the women in the women in this book, you know, not just have they been the first at a number of things, but they have touched every social issue that you could think of, that you could imagine. They were behind the scenes working for these issues. You know, whether or not they had to do with housing, whether or not they had to do with voting, whether or not they had to do with transportation, and making sure that Blacks, you know, could ride on the cars, but that also that Black men could become conductors and get jobs on the cars. You know, I'm a big sports enthusiast. When I think about the work that one of the women in the book did around Title IX and getting access for girls in sports, you know, the work that's been done, you know, in education, the work that's been done in neighborhood development, the work that's been done in getting, you know, politicians, Black politicians elected. You know, there's so much, the work that's been done in hospitals, and we can go on and on. There's so much that we don't know about our own history. And, you know, that's one of the things that I've always said to Fasaha on this project is that, you know, these little known people are the ones that we should be, that we should be pushing to the forefront. You know, and even when I started this out as a Black History project, you know, I don't want to denigrate any of the important historical Blacks who have made a contribution to our city and to our nation and to our country, but there's so many more who have been behind the scenes who we don't recognize and we don't know. And that's what they carried us celebrate.
Well, you know, that it's interesting that you say that, Sissy, and I totally agree, of course. But one of the things that's, you know, that sort of brings that out for me is that when I discovered what Carolyn Davenport Moore, now I don't know who among you knows the name Carolyn Davenport Moore. Okay, I bet you all know about the PTC strike, right?
Yes.
You know about that?
Yes.
Well, Carolyn Davenport Moore took over the NAACP and turned it from a sort of highfalutin, you know, tea drinking, you know, upper class institution into a mass organization. She had signs that said things like, It doesn't matter if you can't read. It doesn't matter if you can't write, you know, come out to our meeting. She changed the NAACP from a few people to thousands of people during her term there. And she was the one who organized the NAACP to lead the strike against the Philadelphia Transit Company and their racist practices. She was the leader. She was the person who led that effort, and was actually responsible for getting Franklin Roosevelt to send troops to Philadelphia to make white workers. They were striking because they did not want Black people to be working there.
Right.
And Franklin Roosevelt said that was an interference in the war effort. But that was her doing. And how many of us know the name Carolyn Davenport Moore?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so appropriate because I know this week really recently, there's been so much emphasis on the 19th Amendment and you know, women right to vote, and you know there've been all these celebrations and declarations, and certainly overlooking the fact that that was for white women. You know,
Right.
that the sisters were still not allowed until we get to all the way up to 64 in the Voting Rights Act. So you think about that. Why do you think that when we talk about that, and you may even be able to identify with it now, the tension that exists among women in the context that it's all about women's empowerment, equal rights for women, but that whole aspect of race still is the dividing line that separates even the women and that gender?
You want to take?
I think it's part, you know, well, first of all, I think that has played a significant divisive role in the early, you know, on the early women's suffragist movement, and certainly in the city of Philadelphia, that absolutely were, you know, in the 19th century, Black women who were involved in the, you know, the right to vote of the suffragist movement. Women like the Fortune sisters and the Fortin family, I would say, Harriet Purvis Fortin in particular, and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, you know, in particular. And I don't even know if people know those names.
Right.
You know, and, you know, we're talking about 19th century women who, you know, and even Harriet Tubman was, you know, was involved in that. Women who, Black women who trusted that their white sisters in the movement, you know, had their back. And, you know, that was a mistake because, you know, they didn't have their back. And, you know, I say that that's been well documented, so I don't think that I'm saying anything new in that regard. I'm saying it in my way. And that, you know, the belief that women were all working together changed when, you know, it was learned that either Black men were going to get the vote before white women, and that if white women had to sacrifice themselves from getting the vote, then they definitely were going to separate from Black women, you know, to get the vote, you know, to get the vote for themselves. You know, our work around, you know, you know, the right to vote, you know, was brought up again, you know, in the 1960s, you know, in terms of the, you know, the work that went into the Voting Rights Act. But what I want to say about what that looked like in the 20th century, and the work that a number of the women in our book, you know, were involved in, certainly, you know, there was this constant push for voter information, this constant push to, you know, get out and vote. One of my former colleagues, Lynette Brown-Sell, for example, you know, had been involved in that work. And certainly there were others who were, you know, involved in that work. It's when we look at what's happening today, it's interesting in watching the convention last night. And, you know, I was waiting for I was waiting for Elizabeth Warren. I kept saying to myself, "Now, when is she going to speak? When is she going to speak? When is she going to, get behind this?" And that's really how I felt about it. When is she going to get behind? When are we going to see her, come out in support of not just Biden, but in support of Kamala? And so when she finally did, I was like, "Oh, okay, there she is." Um, it's so those are the comments that I want to make in that regard. But there's also economics. We all know that without economic power, the push for equality, whether it's voting rights or any other rights that are dear to people and to Black people, we know that economics and having money and equates to having power. And if you don't have that, the road is going to be harder. I'm going to stop because I think I'm starting to ramble and I don't want to do that. Fasaha, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do want to say something because, one of the things that the whole issue of the 19th Amendment has caused us to think about is that the Black women, have always pursued human and civil rights, even though they may not have even called them that. But they've always pursued human and civil rights with an ethic of equality. And what I mean by an ethic of equality is that they were looking for equal access to the vote, to healthcare, to education, to justice, to creative freedom, to the ability to, to deal with sports. Black women have always pursued that with an ethic of equality. You cannot really say that about the white women of the suffragist movement. They were not necessarily interested in equality. There were some who were, perhaps Lucretia Mott and perhaps some others. But in general, they were not really interested in equality. And I say that not as an accusation, but as an exhortation for us to do better and be better, for them to do better and be better. So,
Go ahead, Sissy.
No, what I was just going to add to that was the issue of their, and when I say their, I mean white women in that early fight for suffrage. They wanted to be equal to white men. There was no way that Blacks were going to be seen as equal to whites, and certainly not equal to white men. I read recently about the breakdown that Susan B. Anthony had when when made to realize, not being made to realize, but she was just so angry, just so angry at the thought of having to sacrifice white women getting the vote, and those kind of things give me pause. When we think about this historic nomination of Kamala, I'm waiting to see what our sisters are going to do.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a valid point there because, as you said, the rift between quote unquote two giants, Fred Douglass and Susan B. Anthony, and Douglass basically saying, "Look, it's all about not only certainly the race but also Black men," and how Susan B. Anthony and many of the other white suffragists who had influence at that point began to trot out that racist trope in terms of that the inferiority of Blacks. I mean, where you say that's a seismic break off with everything that you quote unquote have been advocating on the surface. And then lo and behold, you're like, if they're gonna get the vote before us, then we've got to tear them down almost like crabs in a barrel to say, keep them oppressed so that we can walk up their backs to get free ourselves.
I see women specifically Black women, to one of the points that were made, actually coming together. I think that today's movement, the emergence of Black women taking their rightful place, has actually recreated a sisterhood that I had not seen in a while. And I hope that it continues. And this is just my observation. I could be wrong. So I'm curious to the extent that when you chose to write that book, this phenomenon had not taken place yet, had it? Or did you anticipate it?
No, no. I don't. Who could have? Nobody anticipated. Maybe Tarana Burke, maybe had been, or some of the Black Lives Matter people. Maybe they anticipated, but I think this is way beyond what anybody thought would happen.
Yeah, I will say though that, when you say the word sisterhood, it makes me think of the day of our book launch at the convention center. February 29th will be for me a day that I just will remember for a long time to come. And the sisterhood was felt in that room. The
Yeah.
way our book is structured, we besides the fact that it's divided into 9 content chapters, we lay out the stories chronologically in terms of age, a woman's age. So the oldest is first, and then we go to the youngest, and that's what we saw in that room on February 29th. We saw Black women, their families and friends, and ours as well, reaching across age, reaching across work experiences. It was seismic in that way, and it was very powerful to have been a part of that. My mother was there, and I saw her at one point, and she had a tear in her eye. And I asked her about it later. We do a lot of crying in my family, crying of happiness. Fortunately, not a lot of pain, but certainly of happiness. And my mom said something. She's never been, in my eyes, a feminist like myself, an activist, like myself. But she said, I have never been around so many Black women at one time. And to see these Black women going across the room, to hug each other, to talk to each other, to introduce themselves to each other, that was really seismic. And I didn't even expect that with the development of the book. I mean, we knew that we were pulling together a community of women, but to be in that room with that community of women was really significant.
Yeah, one thing that that we should probably explain is that the book itself is structured so that there are women that we call forerunners, women who went on before, who we try to explicate their lives. But then we did original interviews with 49 contemporary women. And those were women like Constance Clayton,
Shirley Dennis,
yes, Shirley
Casco, Emma Chappelle. I mean, just on and on and on,
Yeah. Interviews with Falaka Fatah, and other women who have made a mark on Philadelphia and are still with us. So we invited all of the contemporary women to the book launch on February 29th. And so those are the women who we were talking, who Sissy is talking about. And it's so funny because one of the women, Dr. Ayla Stanford, we interviewed her. She's included in the book, but that was before she did what she did about creating a pathway for Black people in Black communities to get tested for COVID-19. So, and if anybody's interested in any of this, we urge you to go to our website, www.theycarriedus.org, and there are photographs and accounts of the February 29th launching. And there's also a couple of blog posts about, that follow up on some of these women. That, for example, follow up on, the incredible group of sportswomen who were just really amazing. That follow up on the work that Dr. Ayla Stanford did. So, and we really see this as a living document. It's a living document. And so we urge you to take a look at that.
There were also, at our book launch, there were also descendants of several forerunners.
Yes.
Okay, and one of the women, Olivia Stewart Henry, was a pastor, and she was appointed to Tyree AME Church back in 1951. And it turns out that she was my mother's third grade teacher. Okay, and that just blew my mind when I found that out. One of her nieces was in attendance at the launch, and she and my mother happened to sit at the same table together. And they've established since then a relationship. They're like writing back and forth to each other and sending each other things, and then also one of Carolyn Steele Wiley Anderson's descendants. Carolyn Steele Wiley Anderson was a physician and daughter of William Steele, abolitionist and Underground Railroad leader William Steele, and one of their descendants she actually participated in our video launch project. So she was there as well, and others.
Yeah, I think that the people who were there, I thought again about Helen Mullen, who was a name that I would imagine most people would not know. But Helen Mullen was the first Black person to head a department at the Free Library of Philadelphia. And of course, you can't help but wonder what she would have thought about what is going on with the library today. I actually interviewed her, but she died at age 91 in her hometown in Nebraska. But her family sent a representative. So her niece came to the book launch. And I just often think about Helen and her family and what she would think of today's Free Library of Philadelphia.
It's a bit of political commentary.
Before you get too far in, it probably is a good time to tell people how they can get the book, because I think it is one that every home should have on their cocktail table.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, it's available on Amazon. Just type in "They Carried Us" paperback, or if you want the other, I suggest the paperback. And you can get it in a couple of days.
What about audio?
Well, that was something that we were going to do, but everything got kind of, that's been put off. I'll put it that way.
I would still encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
Because people can drop that into their cars, or I think it would be an excellent project. I'm not trying to give you more work. Yes, I am.
But you want to a second volume, and now you want to the audio.
Well, Pastor said that, but I agreed with him.
Yeah.
I want to hold up the book too, because I want to call everyone's attention, especially to the artwork on the cover, which was donated by Barbara Bullock, who lives down the street from Canaan. Okay, I don't know whether she lives on Green Street. Okay, and we didn't know what to say about what the cover should be. And I think we had some vague idea that it should be some kind of photographs or something.
Yeah.
And once we got this all together, we said, well, we can't put photographs on the cover. That's just, it would be too many. We would have to select some, which ones would we select? And we got the idea that we really needed to have a symbolic cover. And Barbara Bullock was so amazing. Her story is in the book too, but she was so amazing. She said, well, you have to come here and pick something. So that's what we did. And that's what we ended up with. And
Who picked that?
oh, we did. We had a choice of 2 images, and we made a decision. The editor and Sissy and I, we agreed that this was the image that we should use for the cover.
Hold it up again, Fasaha.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what I always say, I always want to point out is that, here to
Yes.
me is an image of a person
Mm-hmm.
being carried.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely fits with, the title of the book. They carried us, and the colors are just incredibly beautiful as well.
Have you lost any friends over this book?
Not
leaving
that we
them
know
out?
of.
Not
By
that we know
leaving
of.
them out?
Not that we know of. Not that we know of.
Have you hurt anybody's feelings by leaving them out? That you know of?
Not that we know of.
Well, no, I do know of one.
Okay.
I do know of one, and
Okay.
as we said, there is no way that we have captured all of the Black women who have been behind the scenes, who have worked hard to build up this city of Philadelphia, and whose work in lots of ways extends nationally, and internationally. We know that. And whether or not we have, and we give props to all of the women who we were unable to, to profile in the book.
Because a lot of their work was signed by a man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I have to ask you, what do you mean by that?
They did the work, they did all of the labor, and someone else took the credit for it.
Oh, well, that's very true. That really can be very true.
Well,
And
and that certainly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that certainly does point to, one of the themes that we know that we have experienced ourselves as Black women professionals, and many of the women, if not all of the women in the book, experience as well, as being, the only Black woman at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and sometimes being the only Black person, in the room, and when there's this thing, this dynamic that happens, often with a woman, and certainly with Black women. I've experienced it, Fasaha has experienced it, women in the book have experienced it. We raise our hand, we have an idea, it gets passed over. A man says the same thing 2 seconds later, and everybody's bravo, great idea.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, I certainly, do hear what you're saying, Cody. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I don't think you get passed over today. There's a different feeling, and it. There's a different feeling out there today. And now you have a Black woman, potentially becoming a vice president and maybe even president of the United States. It's a different feeling right now.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Okay, we have to see. I mean, I think that one of the lessons that I would draw from a survey of women from 1694 to the current day is that some problems reassert themselves in every age. Okay,
Yeah.
and so you really we have to be vigilant about that. And when we talk about equality, we have to really believe in that, and we have to really fight for that.
Yeah, we have to support that. We have to stand behind that. We have to work for that constantly, to make that happen. And, I do believe we're going to see a change in leadership in the White House. I absolutely believe that. And I am encouraged that Kamala is going to be a part of that. I love the woman. I love her outspokenness. I love her toughness. But toughness is always, it has sometimes gotten us Black women into trouble.
Yeah.
Good
Good trouble.
No, good trouble. That's right. Yeah. And tell me something, as you look at these women, because another area is how to work it in terms of Black males, that you say husbands, brothers, fathers, others in the community. And these women sometimes have to do what I say, you have to overcome in your house before you can start talking about overcoming in society. And so how did you find, in terms of these women, how they were able to do that when they were in those contexts? Because I read some of the stories where they came from domestic violence situations. Others, they had brothers who were standing against them. How were they able to navigate that, if there was a common thread or tools that they employed?
You want to? Well, I would say that there were many of these women whose fathers were really instrumental in pushing them forward. I'm thinking of Dr. Helen Dickens, whose father, told her, "You must go to school. You must go. You must be a nurse." And then she had the idea, well, if I can be a nurse, why not be a doctor? Okay. And other women who, I think that Falaka Fatah, for example, and her second marriage to, to her husband, he was really instrumental in her doing some of the things that she was doing. He was very, very supportive.
Right.
And there were other men as well who were inspirational to women. The relationship between Caroline LeCount and Octavius Cato, that was very important. And it didn't mean that they were partners, okay? That's what I would say. They were partners. And I think that that is the ideal that we need to be moving toward and thinking about, how to be partners.
Yeah. When I think about this collection of women, in that question, I want to say that I didn't see a lot of that dynamic, and it might have importantly been because of the time of all of their coming of age. Title from Anne Moody's book, Coming of Age. And I think that that's part of why many of these women were as successful as they were, that they had support all the way around. And my research had is like try not to put that on, but I don't know what distinguished these women differently in that way. I do understand that phenomenon that you're talking about, absolutely. But there was something about this group, maybe it was coming of age, that I don't see that these women suffered from that.
That was an excellent question that the pastor asked, because you have to wonder how many women have been held back by the insecurity of men.
Oh.
And maybe some of the women that you dealt with had put those men out of their lives, or maybe they were secure men who were supportive of them. I mean,
I tell you where we saw it, in the sports chapter with the sports women. I mean, absolutely in that, area of male, dominion, and the ways in which those women were written about, the ways in which they were talked about in very denigrating ways, how their, pay, was not on the same level as men. Certainly, Ora Mae Washington. Ora Mae Washington was a basketball phenom and a tennis phenom. She could work her way around Venus Serena, Dawn Staley, any of the best of them that were still here. And she still had to work as a domestic.
Right.
because she wasn't being paid enough.
Mhm.
So definitely in sports, and maybe that's because that is a real divisional area. And even now in the WNBA women and the soccer women, they don't make nearly as much as the male athletes do. We know that.
They'll get there. There's no question in my mind. They'll get there because it's an issue now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see, it's an issue for all of us. And it is a woman's issue, but it's really an issue for we humans, okay? Because what do we gain by shortchanging women? Really nothing.
Yeah.
That really shortchanges our families, our communities. So it's a human problem. And I have great hope that Kamala Harris that she's going to move that agenda. I have great hope that she will.
I just want to add, because I would not be being forthright if I didn't say that certainly we know that this is an area in faith and religion as well.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Ooh.
Okay, so I mean, a huge issue, and the women in that chapter experienced it significantly. Bishop Audrey Bronson did, certainly Bishop Barbara Harris did, Jarena Lee and Zilpha Elal not being able to do the work of God, because they weren't women. I mean, because they weren't men. So definitely faith in sports, and maybe it's a type of world, or a position or area that they work in. But I would bet you any amount of money that with even women like, I'm not going to say these names, but the women in Chapter 2, civic and what is it?
Civic institutions and business.
Civic institutions and business, for as much money as they have earned, I wonder if they have earned as much as their male counterparts.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I think that it speaks to all of us, to what Fasaha was saying about us encouraging certainly our contemporary females, but especially our daughters, our mentees, and all of the young women around us, to constantly exhort them to go forward to whatever is their life purpose. And, we're going to see what that's going to be. But I think, to what you said, it's going to elevate all of us as our women thrive, that we will all be the better for it. I know our time is running out, but I did have one other question, and I'm going to kick it back to Cody. I want to put you all on the spot, both of you. You got a dinner party coming up. What 3 women either of you invite and say, these 3 have to be at the dinner party that I'm going to throw? So, you go first.
That is an excruciating question.
That's not even fair.
You go next.
And one of the reasons that it's not fair is because I say all the time, people say, who's your favorite woman? And I say to everyone, my favorite woman is the one I'm working on right now. That's my favorite. So here's what I'm just gonna, another way to look at that question is any 3 women would be phenomenal. And so I'm just gonna reach back into my hat, and I'm gonna say Reverend Dr. Prathia Hall. She would be at my dinner party. I would have to have Black Alice, because she was the first. And then I also think I would really like to talk with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, because that woman, her poetry was amazing, really amazing. And the things that she had to say, leading up to trying to get the right to vote and, abolition, she was amazing too. And since her namesake was Sister Falaka Fatah, I would say Frances Ellen Watkins Harper.
I would go with Justice Juanita Kidd Stout.
Mhm.
Love to be in the room with that woman. I would also go with Ona Judge,
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
because I would love to laugh with her about getting away from George Washington.
Yes, yes,
I mean, that would be downright funny.
yes, it would be. It would.
And then I would say, and this might surprise you, Fasaha, I would probably say Ethel Allen.
Mm,
Yeah,
wow.
I would say Ethel Allen. Um, you know, she was courageous and she was controversial. And that's why I would want her to be at my table. You know, she was a Republican. She was elected to city council, um, but she was discriminated against in medical school. And when she set up her practice in North Philadelphia, the woman had to tote a gun, you know, because she was trying to help our people. But she, you know, she had gotten, you know, accosted a couple times. And I want to hear the story about how she made those two men take off their clothes and so she could get out of that situation because she knew that they weren't going to chase her. Now y'all read about that.
Interesting choices, I'm telling you. Interesting choices. I don't know that you can beat that.
Mhm. And so, Cody, before I kick it back to you and to our office for a closing word, just want to say to the rest of the Canaanites, thank you for joining today again. All of these are available on demand, and so you can forward the links or you can send people to the website to view this at a later time. But I will tell you, it will be a blessing for all of our families to not only see this interview, but also as well to get the book. I have it on Kindle, but I'm going to get a hard copy as well for my wife, and I'm going to be sharing it eventually, introducing it to my son as well, because I think, again, it should be required reading for everyone. Last but not least, upcoming, what's next? We have our drive-through on this coming Saturday, and that's at 10 a.m. And so we look forward to seeing you all as you drive through. You all know the routine, be masked. Come on through. We want to share some things with you and just want to see your face and do a lot of air hugs and air kisses and all that kind of thing. So that's Saturday at 10 a.m. Next week for Coffee and Conversation, we're going to be focusing on the census. And so everyone, we're about 30 days out and we are coming down to it. And so we want to make sure that we are prepared because there are billions, if not trillions, at stake for not only Pennsylvania, but for Philadelphia in particular. So census will be our discussion for next week. So to our authors, I'll give you the final word and then Cody.
Well, I will say this, Pastor Brennan. I think that, I mean, that sounds, your church sounds like the kind of church that would attract me. And it's really, I'm really glad to hear all the things that you're doing. I'm really so happy to be able to, you know, to present our work and that you're interested in our work. It was lonely there for a while. We worked on this for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's, you know, it's very gratifying to know that so many people, you know, find it useful, find it inspirational, because that's what we intended. So thank you very much for having us.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I want to thank you folks for a spirited conversation. You know, we don't always know what to expect in the few engagements that we've had. And you've made us feel very, very open, very warm, and very welcome. And we really have enjoyed, I've enjoyed speaking with you, most definitely. Pastor, I'd like to introduce you to my brother, Pastor Michael Rogers. Okay. He is in Manassas, Virginia. But I'd like to make the connection between the two of you because I think that you'd have much to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I want to say thank you for allowing us to share these women. This has been a fantastic time this morning, and I deeply appreciate it.
Great, great. Cody?
Fasaha and Sissy, as a husband, as a father of a daughter, and a brother to 3 sisters, I'm proud of you and what you've done. And I just want to sit back and just watch your stars shine and just watch women be elevated to their rightful position. So thank you for sharing this time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so the Lord bless everyone. God keep you all. And until we all
I'm
meet
glad you
again,
thought about this.
bless you all real good.
Think about it.
Take care and God bless everyone.
God bless.
Thank you.
Jake.